Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Taylor Cook, a political analytics master's candidate, and I'm elated to introduce the next panel, Can Data Technology Transform Politics? The panelists discussing this topic are Danielle Nakano, Chief Product Officer at Grassroots Analytics, Brent Seaborn, co-founder and Chief Data Officer at Tunnl, and Maeve Ward, Chief Research Strategy Officer at Grow Progress. Moderating this section will be Michael Schwam-Baird, Deputy Program Director and Associate Professor of the Political Analytics Program.
Thank you very much. All right, well, I'm very excited to have this panel here. Like the other panels, I'm going to go through people's slides and let them talk a little bit about what their sort of one slide is, and perhaps if they want to say more about what they do, introduce us. And then I have a ton of questions, and as we were talking before the panel, we all have like a lot of ideas about how technology and politics has changed. So let's start with your slides. Danielle, I believe this is you.
Yes, drowning in data and starving for modern infrastructure. This is a point of view that I can't wait to talk a little bit more about. Would you like me to dig really in?
Please, yeah. Give us, tell us what we're seeing here.
All right. Well, on behalf of Grassroots, it's a pleasure to be here today. I want to talk about time. The old saying that time is money is still true. As of today, political technology and ecosystem has lagged behind investment in modern technologies that drive operational efficiency. Campaigns, PACs, parties, and their third-party agents are spending an increasing inordinate amount of time cleaning, importing, exporting, and moving data around. Just like any business, this impedes time to value and diverts valuable human capital. Furthermore, political fundraisers and compliance professionals in particular have seen the small business owner profits limited by this situation, leaving them with less buying power and people power. We're seeing some of the largest organizations equally uncomfortable with the current tech stack and providers that they have. Last month in February, the Movement Cooperative put out an RFP for a new voter CRM, and before that, MoveOn announced their plan to jump to Action Network later on this year. Also, our new DNC leadership has found the State of the Union in the DNC to still be running off spreadsheets. The 2025 looks like a race for the next generation technology and foundational infrastructure to Grassroots. A new wave of innovation is already rolling out for the 26th cycle. FindRaise.ai was just announced by Smile AI. Compliance has 2 firms launching. Joey Pacific and the Optimize team have created Operative, and Nico Mealy and Jason Rosenbaum have launched DMC app. As a product management practitioner, I have a lot of empathy for the people that are represented by the graph on my slide and the green manual data management over half their time. Product managers focus on jobs to be done and problems to solve. There's a lot of work to do here.
That's great. Can you just, so I think I understand what I'm seeing, but can you tell us what we're seeing in this graph?
Yeah, definitely. So this graph represents the entire year for somebody who is working in political fundraising or compliance. It's all of their waking hours. And so as you see, the yellow, which is their personal time, it starts evaporating as you get closer to the election. And their manual data management time is just outrageous. It's more than half their time. It's not the best use of human capital. And this situation, I think, hasn't changed that much in a really long time, because in 2014, we started seeing the tool explosion. So before we had the opportunity for real-time technologies, the explosion came, and now there's like a catch-up period that I think we really need to be in. 2020, we saw a lot of pandemic changes in how we stopped meeting and having events. And I think that we've seen a lot of change in how there's like a quantity but less quality going on because of that. And then lastly, just to hitting on 2018, coming out of 2017, there was a lot of new foundational tools that that were less efficient than their predecessors. And that's where a lot of that small business owner piece has seen a slowdown in their ability to do as much as they used to with the same people and time that they have. So we're ripe for change.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, there's like 14 questions that come up to me with this, and maybe to you, but I want to go to Maeve first, and then to Brent, and then we'll come back. So, oh, I'm sorry. I have Brent first. I apologize.
S before W.
Huh?
S before W.
Okay, sounds good. Brent, let's hand it to you.
I'll go through. This is a culmination of a lot of data that we sit on top of. We sit on top of a full voter file where we have probabilistic scores. Everybody else will capture television ratings data. Television is still a remarkably important tool in political campaigns, less so in some corporate communication campaigns, but in political campaigns it's still very important. Although what we're trying to do is use a full data set to be able to help people effectively and efficiently target and retarget people. There's a lot of information on here. This is one particular campaign in Grand Rapids. We're looking at the reach and frequency. The graph in the bottom left there. The green line shows how many times someone has likely seen an ad over the course of the campaign. I can tell you, if you can't read the number, this campaign, people on average saw 55 exposures of an ad from this political entity. And we reached 97% of the population just on television. Now that's really hard to do because not everybody watches television the same way. Some people have totally cut the cord. Some people are split households where they do a lot of streaming, but they also watch some linear television. The graph on the right shows if we break into deciles how people have been exposed to television, we get an idea of what that curve kind of looks like. I said on average 55% or so people saw the ads. Well, actually the top 10% saw an ad from this entity more than 150 exposures. Incredible. The second one, the 90th percentile saw about 100 exposures. On down to the bottom where they saw probably 10 to 20 exposures in the bottom left. That's an important tool that we have in helping media planners do this. It's not just television buyers. They buy everything now, and they're constantly trying to chase people around the spectrum. It's become so fragmented. We really try to help. So people who are watching TV, it's easy to get them TV ads. People who watch some linear television, we have to be on the programs that they're watching. Maybe live sports, probably live sports. That's the biggest driver of that. And then other people on this, we have to find other ways to communicate with. Streaming obviously is a good way to do that, but also social media, peer-to-peer communications. For our clients, these are interactive dashboards. They can select, hey, I just want to take the bottom 40% here and find other ways to communicate with these people. So I can target them on Facebook, or I could target them on Twitter, or I could find them other places on the spectrum, or I could put them into peer-to-peer campaigns. Local linear television for politics is still going to be an incredible currency. I know everybody wants to think that linear television is dead. There's still a lot that happens on linear television. It generates a lot of content, a lot of eyeballs. We're trying to use a full data set, and we have a projected ratings for every person on the quarter hour, so we are likely to know what they're watching. We're capturing all of the ads that air, and then we're providing this tool to our users to be able to help better target media. This sits on top of a massive data set that is being run by some AI, not generative AI, but machine learning AI, that allows us to put all this data together and process this data and produce actionable insights for people trying to effectively manage dollars in a campaign, but effectively manage messages in a campaign.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. And now, and in full disclosure, Maeve used to be my boss. So it's only softballs for Maeve. No, but
he quit shortly after
right, exactly.
I joined.
But let's go to Maeve's slide.
Thank you. The title of the panel is Can Data Transform Politics? And I thought about just saying yes, but Michael told me I had 3 to 4 minutes to fill. So here are 3 numbers that I think explains where we are. By way of background, I've spent my career at the intersection of data and storytelling, helping people use data to tell stories, to deliver messages efficiently, and to measure their effectiveness. Currently, I'm the Chief Research Strategy Officer at Grow Progress. We are a software company that has tools to help our clients deeply understand voters' worldviews and motivations, and then translate those into messages and identify which messages are most persuasive. I'm delighted to have a couple of my colleagues here with me today. Okay, so here are my three numbers. The first is 2.5. 2.5 is the number of times that polling has died and come back to life since I have been working in the field. The first time was in the early aughts when cell phones first became ubiquitous. And I was at a polling firm at the time, and we were just falling all over ourselves because it was going to kill polling. There was no way to reach cell phones. We were stuck with these landlines. We figured it out. The second time polling died was in the 2010s, and that was when online polling seemed like it was going to be the only solution. But there was no way to ever make online polling work. We've largely made online polling work. It's not perfect, but we can learn a lot from it, and a lot of campaigns and other organizations currently rely on it. I think it's notable that all three of us have some background in polling because it forms the background or the backbone of what we do. So 2.5 is my tech will find a way number. 220 million is how I am contextualizing the scope of the data that we're collecting these days. At Grow Progress, let's see, I wrote it down so I didn't. We conducted 6 million interviews last year and tested over 9,000 messages. So if you put together the number of interviews we conducted by the number of questions we asked, that gets us to about 220 million unique data points that we collected just last year. And that's nothing compared to what Tunnl or Grassroots or another organization has. It's just an incredible mountain of data that needs a human in the loop to interpret and apply it. That is what I think is the biggest challenge at the moment. We are automating a lot of collection, a lot of the analysis, but we still need that person. We need to get them off that manual entry and into analysis and interpretation. The last number, this is my why it matters, 115,000 voters. This is the number of votes that Democrats would have need to flip in order to win the election last year. If 115,000 voters in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and or Michigan had voted differently, it would have changed the outcome of the election. That's a teeny tiny number relative to the number of people who voted. And as long as races are this close and this tight, campaigns and organizations are going to be looking at every data point they can to find the advantage and to work more effectively.
Great. Well, thank you for that. I had some questions, but what I actually wanted to go back to first as a way to provide some context for what we're talking about today is what we were talking about earlier over lunch, which is this history of technology in politics. And we all kind of agreed, I think, that it happened sometime around 2002, 2003, 2004. Obviously, campaigns had used sort of generally available technology before, but of actual technologists, data scientists, and sort of specialized technology in politics comes out then. And I wondered if maybe starting with you, and then we can go down, but if you could think about what you were doing at that time or new people and what they were doing at that time that sort of inaugurated this and then how it evolved.
Sure. I was at NGP Van.
Right.
I'm not in polling
and
right now.
Tell people what that is, because that's not necessarily a household name for all of us.
Just to clarify, I'm not in polling. Grassroots Analytics has a progressive consumer database that's used for fundraising. My background is with NGP Van. At that time, I was with the original Democratic left compliance fundraising and voter juggernaut that got purchased by private equity recently, and that's a long, older business, and so things have changed. But at that point in 2004, we had just moved from a desktop version and launched an online version of what we called NGP Classic, and that was for the 2004 presidential election. And so NGP had every single presidential candidate on the left, and we were going strong on going online.
Interesting. And then, so people know that was I don't know exactly how it existed before, but that was sort of every voter in one place, right? Where you could start to cut turf in a more automated way. Is that fair?
Yes, on the van side
On
of
the
it.
van side,
NGP software and van merged around 2010, 2011. So van is the more famous side of the fence. They are the one that was the Voter Action Network and really started helping everybody cut turf. Ended up with a tool called Minivan that let people move online to do their walking and door knocking and eventually relational organizing.
Right. What's your perspective on this
And
history?
I thought you had some background in polling. I'm sorry
No,
if
it's
I screwed
okay.
that up. I assume everyone does. The first time I remember using a model was in 2004 when Emily's List commissioned my team at Heart Research to build a model to predict support in the Senate and the governor's race. And the hardest part about it was explaining what it was and why it was cool, and even more so what you could do with it. Since then, we've come an awful long way.
Mm-hmm. And Brent, you were speaking to this on your side.
And I come out of right of center politics. I think I'm probably the only one up here, maybe the only person in the room, honestly. But I was working at a polling company, again, the research company. We started to look, how could we take what we're doing in survey research and apply it to large-scale consumer databases and voter files, and really started micro-targeting at the time. I kind of came out of the 2000 election was very close. And I think everybody went back to rethink how we're running campaigns. Can we do things smarter, more effectively? How are we going to run better grassroots campaigns? And looking at all of that, we finally convinced the Bush-Cheney campaign at the time and the RNC that it was worth spending a lot of money that they'd never spent before on analytics and data. Up until then, campaigns targeted on something like fortress precincts. More than 60% of people in this precinct voted for us last time, so we're going to campaign to them all again. And we're going to go to four primary voters. And like that one always baffled me. Like if they voted in 4 primaries, you think they're going to forget there's a general election today? But maybe. But it was very rudimentary and very ad hoc. And it was like, we'll do this neighborhood and we'll do these people who voted in this election. And then we got a list from somebody. And then we canvassed 40,000 people, and it was none of it was systematic or organized. And we tried to bring all that data in together, put it into a single database, and then research it, and then model it onto the rest of the people in there. So we had probabilities on how people were going to act and behave, and what messages were important to them. Managing a coalition in a presidential campaign is challenging. You're looking at sometimes competing interests. You're looking at different views. And trying to find what message track is important to people is really hard to do. And you don't want to waste resources miscommunicating people. We did a pretty good job of targeting a lot of the standard coalitions. We also found that education was a real important issue to a lot of people, especially in the West. And we went through and found a lot of people who leaned Democratic or were independent and identified them as being likely to respond well to education messages. And it was something that I think in a handful of states in the 2004 race pushed it in the Bush-Cheney direction. But that's where I was at the time. What we didn't talk about is that same election cycle we were talking at lunch, Howard Dean captured the internet. Now, everybody here has grown up on the internet largely, and to say like, hey, they use the internet sounds kind of stupid. But they used the internet, and they democratized fundraising, and they raised millions of dollars in a way that nobody had done before, and it gave him a voice and a platform that he would never have had without his online fundraising apparatus. And that was a really important moment in political technology too, I think.
What's an area that you feel has changed kind of the most dramatically in your time in politics due to technological development in our sphere? I mean, obviously there's things outside of our sphere like the internet or something like that. But is there something that we do very differently now than we did 20 years ago because of developments in our field?
I'll take this one if you guys don't want. I think, again, we didn't invent the internet. We didn't invent social media, social networking. We didn't invent those things, but the way we use those things now is remarkably different. Again, we were talking at lunch, the the Obama campaign did a masterful job of using social networking. I don't want to call it social media because it wasn't like a mass distribution, but it allowed you to find other people. It was really a social networking tool. It didn't become a social media tool where you were broadcasting up until like this last couple of cycles. And you look at the difference between something like Facebook, where you talk largely to your friends and people that you know, as opposed to something like TikTok, where it goes out there and anybody can find it. Or you look at podcasting. Used to be there was a limited radio spectrum. And if you wanted to have a radio show, you needed to convince a network that you could get an audience. Now you can buy a microphone and you can podcast that same day. And we've democratized media. I don't think we really invented any of that stuff, but it's all stuff that we're navigating and trying to think through. There's a whole bunch of technology that we're building and using on data and analytics, and processing power has gotten better, and AI is an emerging tool, and that stuff underneath it is really important. But you just look at the fragmentation and the democratization of media has really changed how all of us operate.
Okay, do y'all have particular perspectives on that? Like where have you seen the most?
I think where I've seen the most, when I started and we were thinking about whether a message was effective with somebody or not, we were thinking about it as a lot of binaries. This is a black voter or a white voter. This is a man or a woman. This person lives in the South or they live in the Northeast. And because of all the data enhancements we have today, because of the new computing power, we can communicate with people in a way that reflects and respects their intersectionality. That I am a white woman who lives in the Northeast, as opposed to just one characteristic or another.
Right. Yeah, we've talked a lot. I mean, I know Grow Progress, but elsewhere about, and I find this interesting based on just broad issues that I've seen, is how can we see the full voter, but with the tech that we have, because we don't have to be as simplistic necessarily.
Yeah, and we don't have to rely on the characteristics that we can see and observe. We can ask deeper questions to learn more about what they value, what motivates them.
Right. And how is that in fundraising?
For me, I think a lot about Zoom and the pandemic and going online during that time. We had already been building virtual spaces for meetings, but the pandemic accelerated all of that. And that's really been a huge transformation. The world of fundraising, in my estimation, has not returned to events the way it used to be. And I think that's greatly affecting how things are working and how engaged people are. There's just a lot less local walkathons for your, council member. There's just a lot more digital. And I think that overall, the Zoom transformation has been great for all of us. We all like working at home occasionally and doing some laundry. But when it comes to meetings and being in person and creating energy from people connecting, that hasn't really recovered yet.
And where are you seeing, so we've talked a little bit about, the history of how tech came into the political field, where we've seen it change. Where are you seeing, I guess particularly in your firms, but also just in the broader field, where are you seeing particular areas of innovation? And I can ask specifically about AI, but I don't want to just focus on that, though I think there are opportunities there. But where do you see it? Where do you see innovation going in our space?
I definitely think that we are right about to have a hype cycle with innovation and technology. I believe that personalization, affordable personalization, is something that the industry is ready and hungry for. And because of the state of affairs in the marketplace, I think there's a lot of innovators that are ready to go and take a jump for the 26 cycle and jump in on that.
And do you have a sense of what that might be more?
I think that there's a lot on the infrastructure front,
Okay.
But just to
like
nail.
CRM. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
To go back to where you started.
Yeah.
On Gen AI, I know that last cycle, Quiller was created for the Democrats to create AI-safe content. That was, I think, a little late into the cycle, but it's already been picked up and growing now for the 25-26.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely a place that Gen AI is helping. I think of it last mile content creation. We haven't quite figured out how to get that infrastructure corrected or modernized.
Yeah. Any thoughts on like the direction of innovation? Either what you're doing to the extent that you can tell us, or where you see other people going?
If we don't want to, I mean, AI is what everybody's trying to figure out right now. And there's generative AI and there's machine learning AI, and we sort of talk about AI as all the same. It is different. It's compatible. They source into one another. But I think everybody's going to be figuring out, how does AI help personalize things? How does it help answer questions? But our ability to store and process data keeps growing exponentially, like we've all known, and the tech community has known forever. But providing better and faster insights is what everybody's trying to do. You talked about looking at the intersectionality of people. I think we generally have, and I think it's maybe more true on the right, and certainly we have coalitions and we have identities, but we tend to group people into messages. They're social conservatives, they're social liberals, they're fiscal conservatives, they're pro this policy. We tend to look at classifying people less demographically or geographically, and more looking at what issue are they going to respond to, and then looking at within that sort of how the demographics break out. Now, obviously, there's going to be something like suburban women are the key to this election, which like you can say all the time, but there are obviously demographic, geographic traits we're looking at, but we really focused on building message coalitions and communicating with people on the key messages rather than on their identity or their demographics.
And is that something that you think will change going forward, or that you'll be like evolving to be more specific? I think we're going to get a lot more specific in how we generate content to them. Obviously, we've been A/B testing for a long time. A/B testing is very good. A/B testing suggests that B works and A doesn't. Where it goes is A works with 60% of the population, but B works with 40% of the population. And we shouldn't choose one or the other. We should target each. And that's as we start to get smarter. Every campaign is scrapped for resources. I don't care how much like eye-popping numbers they raise. There's never enough resources to do everything you want to do. So you're like allocation of resources is always a key. You're always trying to get an edge and be just a little bit more effective in spending those dollars. And if you can get a 5% improvement or a 15% improvement, it makes all of the difference in some of these campaigns. But I've been on one campaign where money was not an issue. That was the Bush-Cheney 2004 campaign, and even that was somewhat limited. But I've never since then been a part of a campaign where money was not a constraining factor. Yeah. Maeve, where are you seeing things? Or how are you thinking about it?
I'm picking a lane. We are also playing around with AI in two different ways. How can we use AI to improve our operational performance? How can we find efficiencies and work smarter with the resources that we have, generate insights faster, is one side. And then the other side is what kind of toys can we develop for our clients to play around with. We have a product called Persuasion Sandbox, where if you put in the issue that you're interested in talking about, a few values or characteristics, and you push a button and it will give you a message. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good. Fortunately, you can test the messages using a randomized control trial, but clients seem to really love just having that piece. The other thing, and my team here today who focuses most on this, we've spent a lot of years figuring out how we can get the most interviews, the most survey interviews. And increasingly, we're looking at how can we ensure the quality of those interviews instead of just how can we get the largest number. There's a lot of ways we can do that, and we've automated a lot of those processes just to ensure that the quality of what we're collecting is really smart. The next frontier is figuring out how we reach people who are not responding to surveys, because we increasingly know more and more that they are different than the people who are responding to surveys. So even if we have quality interviews among survey respondents, it's not a perfectly representative survey.
That's a really good point for anybody who's going to start in political consulting or something like that. It is really easy to collect a lot of interviews today, a lot of cheap interviews. Having more bad interviews is actually worse than having fewer. And we have sort of said, hey, we want more. It's really the quality and getting quality interviews. It's super nerdy, boring stuff, but like your sampling is really important. Stratification is really important. Getting to those underrepresented voters in research is really hard. They don't want to do this. You get some. I was looking years ago, a decade or more ago, at some of our samples, and we had everything in place. We had the right number of race and ethnicity, and we had age, sex, we had region, we had all these things. And I looked at the people who completed the survey, and 60% of them were primary voters. And I'm like, wait a minute. We're like, some of these people, like, we were like 20% were general election voters. And then we had a handful of people who didn't vote, consistently. And it was totally backwards. It was totally skewed. We should have had way more people who are not habitual voters and certainly not primary voters. But we started, it was simple to quota control for primary vote history then. That's easy. We started to look at how can we use generative models to look at who is an unlikely survey respondent, and then say, hey, great news is we got 100 of these people. We know that their opinions should be weighted up a little bit. We know that we also got a lot of people who take surveys habitually, which we can either remove from the sample or we can discount. But sampling, for anybody who's going to consume polling or be in the polling, really be confident in what you're doing and ask questions is one thing I would say. It's a little bit technology, and it's a little bit getting into the other things you've already spoken about today, polling. But that's a real challenge, and bad data is all of the analytics and all of the models we have. If you're feeding it bad data, it just gives you completely the wrong result.
Danielle, I often think of fundraising, and you were talking about interpersonal events for fundraising. I think of fundraising as a very kind of warm thing where you have to get in a room with people and talk to them and convince them. You're developing technology to sort of replace some of that. Does it often feel like you want to figure out how to get back to? No, I might have it the wrong way.
No, I think that what fundraising is doing with analytics today is really figuring out what's the right conversation to engage a prospective donor or resolicit an existing donor. And it's really similar to what Brent was saying, where you really want to be engaged and have a good conversation with somebody who wants to listen to you. And so on the front with fundraising, I really think that it's a great opportunity for all of us to hyper-target and worry less about the methodology and more about the conversation. A lot of the analytics will help guide us to understand if somebody is more likely to be high dollar and you should pick up the phone and create that warmer connection versus folks that actually love to give $5 every single week. They're recurring sustainer types and they love to be low dollar, give to lots of folks and organizations. So really the analytics can help determine the best way to have a conversation with somebody, and it's really the topic that matters the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious if and also there's cards going around, so we'll take some questions soon. But I'm curious if you all see some of that trade-off with an over-reliance on analytics, taking away from the sort of warmth and authenticity of interaction, which is a big part of politics, right? And it's not just about a politician talking to the voter, but it's about voters talking to other voters. Bringing them in and building community that then is involved in politics. And I guess the one thing I'm always wondering is there a way we cannot lose that in the types of companies or organizations we build, but also is there technology that can support that very well? I think we've seen a little bit in the Dean Obama organizing that happened, but I don't know that I've seen it a lot since then. Maybe a little bit in relational, but I'm curious what you all think. Maybe you're doing it in donations.
For me, I get back to post-pandemic. We haven't recovered from Zoom meetings all the time and Zooming in order to convene almost regularly. the world is kind of getting a little bit more returning to places. But until we, as a people, kind of, I think, want a little bit more in person, we're going to be missing out. I think that's how a lot of candidates in the past have changed hearts and minds. It's getting out there and being with people, shaking hands, kissing babies.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen, is anyone else have any thoughts on this trade-off?
The way it showed up for us this past cycle was when you run a message test with Grow Progress, we get back to you. If you have 5 messages, we'll tell you what the treatment effect is for each of the 5. And oftentimes there are tenths of percentage points that separates the best message from the worst message, which effectively is no difference at all. But we have clients who, whatever the top testing message is, that becomes gospel. That's the message to run. Why would you ever do anything differently? But as you were saying, maybe some of the messages work better with other groups, but also they all might work really well. So the trick is how to take everything else you know about the campaign and the landscape and politics and who's spending money on what kind of messaging, on what kind of outlets, and put all that knowledge together with what you learn from the message testing, and then make decisions, and not to just rely on one input at the expense of all others.
Yeah. Has that been your experience as well, or?
I think the authenticity, I think key to winning a campaign, we all are in technology and analytics, and it's all really important, and it all supports campaigns and helps them function well. You need to have a candidate, you need to have a message, and you need to have a functional campaign organization. If you don't have those three, and I've worked on campaigns where we've lacked some of those things. We have lacked some authenticity, and we've had candidates want to say the focus group tested message over and over again, and they didn't really believe it. It's apparent, you can tell. We've had campaigns that can't actually implement all of the analytics. They've paid for a lot of analytics. They don't have the resources or the organization within the campaign to execute it. So the technology and analytics all help, and it certainly helped with 115,000 votes. Having a little bit better technology does that. It doesn't make up 20 points. If you're 15 points down going into election day, having a better technical apparatus isn't going to fix that. Fundamentally, you need to have authentic candidates. So, and the messaging has to be authentic. And sometimes if you're going to be a practitioner here and you're going to work with candidates, they have to talk about this issue. You have to find a way they can talk about it, but you have to find a way in their terms that they're comfortable talking about it. And that's really hard. I can focus group test, or I can survey research a dozen messages, but it has to be in the voice of the candidate who's going to give it. And in authenticity, I mean, Trump, whether you like him or don't like him, he has this authenticity about him, which is like, I know the guy that I see on TV saying the stuff, that's who he is when the camera goes off. And that is something he has. Like, there's all kinds of quirks he has, and there's a lot of things about him that are different than a typical politician, but you know that when the camera goes off, that's the exact same guy you get. And that's part of what his appeal is, I think, to a lot of people is even if I don't agree with it, I know that he's saying it, and it's what he's going to say in 15 minutes when the cameras are out.
Yeah. I'm curious, and this is also something I think has evolved in the last, 10, 15 years, what you see as the positive, but maybe the drawbacks too, of having what are essentially startups in the political space. So I think historically there were consulting firms, survey firms, they worked like partnerships, like law firms, things like that. Now we have investors, and that means we need exits, and that means things get sold to private equity or there are takeovers. On the other hand, it means that capital can come in and really sort of ramp up a particular technology that might, need capitalization. But I'm wondering if you've seen, what you've seen on the good and the bad of that model in politics. I know Grow Progress, we took, we had investors and so on. Yeah.
We took on investors to start.
Right.
We've made a decision not to raise additional rounds of funding, which is a direction we could have gone. We could scale and grow faster if we raised a round, but we've decided that we want to grow at a steadier pace and make our own decisions about the path forward. As once you raise a round and take on more investors, it's not entirely within your control.
They're not angels anymore.
That's right.
You have expectations.
I don't
More
think
expectations.
any of the models are perfect. There are other groups who do message and ad testing and throughout democratic politics who are funded entirely by big money donors. They're not always any more in control of what they're doing than a group that is run or owned by private equity. Donors are fickle. They can give money and take money back. So I don't think there's any pure way to go about it.
I think for me, the loss is time. Eventually every business that stops answering the phone for customers and focuses solely on mergers and acquisitions and quarterly earnings is going to have a reckoning in the marketplace by innovative competitors that are customer service oriented. So for me, it's a time gap. I was talking earlier on my slide about all the individual hundreds of little people and how they spend their small time. But really, I'm thinking now about the big clock, the innovation clock, and that's maybe an election cycle. Time. It's always about time.
So you don't see it necessarily as a liability. It just kind of is one way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's one way to do it.
There's some, over the years, not recent, but over the years I've been a part of trying to improve the overall technology in the party apparatus or the party system. Culturally, there's some things that are different. One is we're in a highly regulated space. Politics is maybe not pharma or medicine, but it's a highly regulated space. So there are laws that matter that you have to comply with. And I don't think all of the tech investors are used to having to deal with all of the compliance and regulatory stuff that happens on partisan politics. That's one cultural difference. The other is you often get tech investors who want to come in and they'll work with one of the groups that sit on top of a party apparatus, and they sort of say, hey, we're going to come and we're going to do this, and then we'll institute it into our party structure down to the volunteer level. That's not the model that politics really works in. It's really quite the opposite. It's not that the state parties are franchisees of the national. You can't just go to Arizona and say, this is the way you're going to do it. Arizona says, no, we have our own party officials. We have, and this is the way we run campaigns in Arizona. Now, they might be right or wrong, but you have 51 plus territory different party apparatus that actually control the national party and the national party structure. And under that, you actually have volunteers who are willing to do this or not willing to do this or willing to donate or not willing to donate. So the grassroots nature of politics and the state and local nature of politics is really different for a lot of tech investors when they come into this, because they think like, we're going to go to the corporate office and we're going to tell all the franchisees how to run things. And it's not always that easy.
Or they connect and focus on nonprofits as well, because there's a natural intersection between political entities and nonprofits, but they're not actually the same market space. They're different. Nonprofits much bigger, and whenever that happens, you have an every action, and then private equity buys you out.
Well, I was thinking in particular about, and this may be a little bit of inside baseball, but the fact that one part of the progressive ecosystem, which is Movement Cooperative, wants to build a new CRM, presumably to replace Van. Is that right?
Action Kit. Yes, Movement Cooperative, they're leaving the van.
Right.
And then Move On is leaving Action Kit, which is part of the NGP Van Bonterra family. So
but
they're
sort of
leaving the same entity.
Right, but you get this infrastructure that gets built up around a particular tool. That tool gets sold, and maybe there's not enough innovation, or there's other tensions. And then another part of the movement says, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to use this other.
Yes, like between 2018 and 2022, there was a massive amount of mergers and acquisitions in the political tech space, especially around fundraising and online donation forms. And NGP Van, Every Action, Bonterra was a big part of that. And now a lot of those larger legacy organizations are starting to leave the Bonterra family because they're looking for technology that's had investment and not just
And it's more
merger.
mission aligned, I guess, as well, right? That's the other, I feel like that's the risk I was thinking of as well, which is like, is it mission aligned with something that is not just about, is about making money, but is also about pursuing a given ideological or issue-based
And I
goal?
think that's where the customer service comes right back in because, you know, where in GP Van every action Bonterra landed, it was in a place that there is no phone number to call and ask for customer support. And for political campaigns and compliance people trying to make sure that they are accurately filing some report about the President of the United States, that's nerve-wracking. Even if you're
campaigns.
going down to the dog
Yeah.
catcher, everybody wants to be right when they sign their name.
Political campaigns are notoriously calm as well when working with their vendors.
Yeah.
I will say, anybody going into technology and politics, there is an incredible opportunity there to innovate. And a lot of innovations that eventually make it back into corporate communication or nonprofit actually end up happening in politics. And I kind of tell people, if you think about this, if you're a toothpaste company and you manufacture toothpaste for 2 years and then you've got 1 day to sell all of your toothpaste, and if you don't sell more toothpaste than the other companies making toothpaste, you go out of business. There's a lot of pressure to get it right. Now we've expanded that. You get a month that you can go early and you can buy your toothpaste, but you still have a limited window that you have to sell all of your product, and it happens every 2 years or every 4 years. There's a lot of pressure to innovate, and a lot of the innovations that I have made or that Tunnl has made collectively in politics, the core people are really fascinated to see this because they don't always work with that same pressure. They certainly don't work with the same deadlines. It's always fun for me to get to work with some of the bigger agencies, Madison Avenue agencies, on stuff when they start saying like, oh, we'll start planning in December and then we'll cut an ad. We'll have 3 months to cut an ad, and then this ad will get bought for the next 6 months. And I'm like, you know, you can do this in a week. Like we do it all the time. Like we shoot ads overnight and they're on the following Monday, they're up. Like you can be more reactive, and politics does the pressure and intensity and the stakes of politics do generate some really important innovations.
Yeah, and the need to scale incredibly quickly also transfers to corporate world. Grow Progress is a public benefit corporation, which means we can be choosy about the corporate clients that we take on. We do work with corporate clients. We figure they're going to work with somebody. They might as well work with us. And then we reinvest that revenue into tools for the progressive movement. We initially were a little bit cautious about that. We were afraid that walking into a conversation with a commercial client, knowing that we have political roots, they would be like, no. But almost to a person, they were like, the understanding that politics is where most of the innovation happens, and it happens so fast and scales so rapidly, that's just a really unique selling point for us to bring to the table.
Yeah. So this is a question that actually I've been curious about because it's sometimes hard to figure out. And maybe we can figure it out because we have people from both sides, but do you all have a sense of how data and tech stack are different between sort of Republican and Democratic sides? That is, it often seems from what I can see on the Republican side, it looks similar. There might be differences in how people are targeted. Like I have heard that before, that people are more targeted based on issues rather than more like demographic drill downs. But are there other key differences that you've seen across your careers?
I think we've largely been chasing each other. Like one party does something innovative and then the next party copies it, and it sort of leapfrogs every couple of years. The Republicans are way better than the Democrats at it, and the Democrats work to catch up, and then the Democrats innovate something or some new player comes into the stage on the Democratic side, and then the Republicans innovate. I think they're largely probably the same. It is getting to work on corporate stuff is kind of fun for me because you do get to generally work with nonpartisan or bipartisan. So I do get to work with Democrats, and they say, oh, this isn't the way we're used to getting it at all. We get it this way from this vendor on the Democratic side, and then we decide which way is preferable. But I think they largely mirror each other and generally kind of leapfrog each other a little bit is what I've seen. Going back to 2004 again, when we really started to institutionalize this and make data and technology something that the parties were invested in.
Yeah. I married a Republican for the opposition research.
It's a long research project.
Yeah, almost 20 years now. And I think I largely agree that there are surges, right? Democrats had like a really good 4 years between 08 and 12. But leapfrogging is a good analogy. Things like we might start with identity and you start with issue, that's more of a wrapper that you put on the technology and less about the technology itself. Because at the end of the day, you're using both.
The Democrats are still fundraising on channel. Like, do you like an email or do you like text? Spray and pray.
Someone asked about the strengths and weaknesses of social media ads for fundraising and polling. Those are fairly distinct. There are polls that recruit on social media, and obviously there's fundraising. Is there any sense that that's doing work for you all?
In polling, we do some of our respondent recruitment through social media. If you want extra Candy Crush time, watch this ad or take this survey. But it's a small percentage of what we do. The biggest challenge on social media for us now is that we run randomized controlled trials online. So we're showing you a message or a piece of content in a controlled environment, and obviously you're going to react to that differently than you're going to react to it if you're just scrolling through your feed. So we haven't quite figured out how to
Reproduce the doom scroll.
reproduce the doom scroll. That is correct. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is that related to fundraising, or are you all mostly text-based?
Oh, text. Fundraising is all of it, every channel, yeah.
Okay, and is it still effective, the sort of social media-based?
I think that there's a lot of experimentation going on with socials and how to use those to advertise by fundraisers, because it's a little bit different. You can't get a straight connection. So there's a lot of experimentation going on.
Yeah. Is that something you've used as well, or?
There's a little bit of panel recruitment that happens there again, but actually like doing research, doing actual like polling questions on social media, no. Now there's A/B testing. We don't do it, but campaigns have done A/B testing social media, but it as a research tool, we haven't really used social media.
Yeah. Is there, when you all are thinking about commercial work, because that's, I think many companies do, maybe, I don't know about fundraising, but many companies do commercial work or sort of quasi-political work as a way to deal with the cyclicalness? Cyclicality, thank you, of the political sort of revenue that comes in. How do you think about kind of your social impact missions or your political missions relative to that work, and think about sort of how you can make those work for you while trying to keep everyone employed and moving?
You go.
Okay. I'm actually wondering if this is one difference. We have a code of conduct. It's available on our website. It enumerates the things that we the kinds of work that we would decline. We won't work with tobacco companies. We won't do anything with guns. We won't knowingly disseminate false information. There's a series of them. We take that very seriously. We have a process through which anybody at the company can submit an objection to something that we're testing. We spend a lot of time on that. We think that it is worth it to spend that kind of time being choosy about the commercial clients that we work with because of the potential for that revenue, not just to smooth out the political cyclicality, but also to help us scale faster.
Yeah. And does that feel like that's happening? Does that work? I know it's, sorry. Yeah. You seem like you had a thought on that.
Like we're actually moving the two businesses apart a little bit. Our political work, we're letting the political people do the political work. We're letting the tech people do the advocacy work. So we're actually moving the politics outside of a lot of what we do in our corporate communications. Our corporate communications, Tunnl's corporate communications business is much, much larger, and it does almost no partisan work. There's another company that I'm affiliated with who does the political work. But we have really started to move to take the politics out of it. There's some cyclicality revenue, which from a business standpoint is it's great. It generates cash every couple of years. It's not great if investors are looking at you because they don't like, why does this huge spike every 2 years? And there's also sometimes conflicts. And frankly, we have a very diverse set of employees who are all very talented, who all have very divergent political views. So we did not hire people from Republican politics or from Democratic politics. There are people who have backgrounds in each, and at Tunnl, we're working to, and we've got a really great crew of people, and it's great to hear some of the political conversations for people who have them. Many people have no interest in politics. So it's, Tunnl is taking a view of just working nonpartisan. We support a lot of agencies, partisan agencies, some on the left, some on the right. Our political wing are the people who get into the trenches and do the Republican and Democratic stuff. So we don't have that same sort of challenge or structure you guys do. Frankly, it's hard to recruit from just one party. If you're really trying to hire really talented people, it's really hard if you're confined to only hiring people from within a party structure or within ideology. And that's, if you're able to do it, I think that's great. For us, we've sort of broadened it and said, hey, this doesn't have to be partisan. We can do a lot of good work here and a lot of smart things, and we should not look at this as a partisan organization.
So I have kind of one more, this goes more to the tech side, but I think this is interesting, is that one of the things that we deal with when we get a lot of data, a lot of survey data, a lot of voter data is data quality issues, particularly as we start sort of scouring the globe. I think of this particularly in survey data, but it comes up in other areas. And so what are some of the ways that you've found useful to use automation, machine learning, AI, to improve data quality at scale so you can use this data, correctly?
I've got people on spreadsheets and text files, and they're moving a lot of data and they're cleaning a lot of data manually all the time. They're cutting lists from this tool into that tool and moving things around constantly. So they're just seeing data quality evaporate because every time they move, there's a match that's off. And it's a problem. It's a real problem, which is why, again, infrastructure. The left is ready for a major race.
Do you feel like
with
for
innovation.
your company in particular, that's where you're moving, is how do we better automate all these multiple spreadsheets and lists and things we're dealing with that come in?
Not for us.
Okay.
I think we're thinking a lot more about our clients and our customers and how do we change their lives, because that's their lives. That's not Grassroots lives. That's what our customers are dealing with. So yeah, we're thinking a lot about that, about how to help solve those problems and bring back a lot more time to their day that's focused on quality or people interactions.
As I was on Amtrak coming up for this and coming up with my 3 numbers, I almost used 1 in 4. 1 in 4 is the number of interviews that we collect that we throw away because it doesn't meet our quality standards. And I think that number will grow. We will continue to figure out smarter ways to separate good interviews from bad interviews. And that feels critical to make sure that my 2.5 doesn't turn into a 3. For Polling to Survive, we have to get better about identifying the quality.
I totally agree. It's quality samples. It's like layers upon layers of stratification. It is chasing hard to reach people on the survey platforms. So it is getting quality data is really like, it costs money, but it's worth doing because it's a waste if you don't.
Yeah.
And
Any
you can
final-
automate it.
Yeah, that's
which
true.
is something that we've been able to do, which is really cool. It happens behind the scenes. The Wizard of Oz just separates it out for us.
Any final thoughts for our students and our audience to chew on, or we didn't cover?
I'll say that we've democratized media and we have I think social media has changed the way society, not just politics, society kind of operates. Everybody's sort of in their own bubble. We keep getting fed, the algorithms feed us more information that we like. It's hard for someone my age because I keep getting fed more information, or at least articles that I click on. Sometimes I click on stuff that I don't agree with, oddly enough, and then I get more of it. But that's like, but the algorithms are like putting us all in these little bubbles, and I'm very hopeful that all of you are going to navigate that better than the older generations sort of have in terms of applying practice and figuring out how to work through this. But I think when we look at what analytics can do and how social media works and the democratization of media, I think that's a really important challenge. Most of you have probably grown up with social media and are probably going to be much more adept when you're professionals at execution and implementation. But that's going to be, it's not just a technical challenge. I think it's just a societal challenge that all of you are going to have to deal with. Is how do we work through this? And I love working on bipartisan because I get to talk to Democrats and we get to compare notes on stuff. And so many people, when we looked at the neighborhoods people live in, don't live in mixed neighborhoods and don't get the interaction. So like break out of your bubbles and talk to the people on the other sides. And I think that's an important thing to do. That is a byproduct of the technology, but something that I think is going to be important for upcoming races and upcoming political cycles.
What he said, go to events, go to real life things.
Yeah.
Like this.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, please join me in thanking our panelists, and I really appreciate it.